Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Af Malhotra on Straight Talk with Af. Now, once again, I have a most incredible guest on my show, and this is an individual I've been watching and learning from over the past few years. Right when I spotted him on YouTube as a young man, talking about things that were way beyond his age, from astrology to predicting when COVID was about to happen, just pre-COVID, predicting that there was going to be some sort of a pandemic, to in recent times, even, figuring out that there was going to be something catastrophic in Gaza, alongside many, many other incredible predictions. He is a remarkable person because I feel like he's been gifted somewhere from someone some abilities and this incredible ability to pattern recognize, which, as you know, many of you know, I'm a big fan of. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome the wonderful Abhigya Anand on Straight Talk. Hi, Abhigya. Thank you for coming onto the show.
Jai Shri Krishna, Namaste, and Sarvebhyo Namaskaraha. Welcome everyone to the show, and thanks so much for having me here today, Avji. Thank you.
My pleasure, my absolute pleasure. So, as you know, I am a big fan of trying to figure out why people are the way they are, and a lot of that
Mhm.
stems from their childhood and their parenting and their siblings and where they lived and so on. And I feel like over the last 4 or 5 years doing this show, every time I do a show, it really helps me to understand the person and then go into the specialism or the career or the book that they've written or the gift that they have. So if I may, I'd love you to sort of educate the audience on who you are and where did this all start? How did you get into this world of predictions and so on? And so over to you, and please start from right at the beginning if you wish.
Sure, sure, definitely. Jai Shri Krishna, and Namaste to everyone listening today. And I have been into the world of Jyotisha, which is the science of light and time, since the age of 11. I started with the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, which is a message from the Supreme Himself. It is a divine message to all of mankind to understand the intricacies of nature and humans and philosophy in detail, and basically to understand who we are. So I started from a very basic level, just memorizing these verses because that's how we are taught to start off with. Later on in our lives, when we reflect upon those verses, we begin to realize the depth that they have in store for us, and we begin to realize the effects of each of those verses in our actions when we are doing something in our day-to-day lives. Those verses just flash before us, and they help us, they guide us throughout life. So initially, I started with memorizing it. Later on, my mother realized that it's very important to understanding, to basically understand the meaning of each verse as well. So she began teaching me Sanskrit, the oldest language in the world, and the Sanskrit Bhasha that helped me a lot to understand Jyotisha and every other thing that I've been learning so far with a better depth. So it started with the Bhagavad Gita, of course, and Sanskrit was essential in understanding the verses of the Gita. And it so happened that the place where I was learning Sanskrit was also a place where someone was teaching Jyotisha, the fundamentals of astrology, which is astronomy and mathematical calculations for it, before which I was not a big fan of mathematics at all. And later on, as and when I began to learn the Gita and then Sanskrit and then Jyotish came in front of me, they were not very open to teaching me Jyotisha, the teachers there, of course, because of my age and other factors. But then I had to prove that I was capable of understanding the subject, at least to an extent, and they were quite happy about it later on, and they helped me initially. But later on in my journey, I encountered a lot of obstacles. It's a very long journey of studies in Jyotisha, and a lot of ups and downs. A lot of obstacles came in. But then Sri Ganesha and the meditations that I've been doing and the efforts of my parents in this journey have helped me a lot in going ahead and overcoming some of these obstacles. But then it was a spiritual foundation that started off my journey into Jyotisha, questioning why things happen and why do certain events happen in an individual's life or in a collective situation. So, say a country or a particular population, or say a particular civilization, or even say an entire, continent. Why do certain events happen? Why do we have very powerful natural disasters that change the course of human destiny? Why do we have thousands of people who die in certain places, certain situations, certain times? Why not at other times? Why specifically during certain times? And then, of course, there is a deep curiosity to know if there is any pattern behind this, if we can predict this. Everyone wants to do it, but it's very difficult. Data scientists try it always. Of course, data scientists do have an edge in terms of the information, but there is a whole new side to understanding why things happen, and that is deeply rooted in Vedic philosophy. It comes from the concept of karma, which is action. So there are different types of action, and it is a very simple concept. And almost everyone who's listening to this, of course, would have an idea of this concept. You do good, you beget good. You do bad, you beget bad. But Jyotisha is a deeper study of this whole concept of karma. So I went deeper into this, and day by day, as in when I was studying everything, initially in Jyotisha, you get attracted to just making accurate predictions. But later on, as and when you study it, you begin to realize it's more than just making accurate predictions. That's just the start. The goal is something you begin to realize as and when you progress on the path. And I've still not realized it, but I feel that I'm beginning to understand the gravity of what Jyotisha is. It is a science to lead humanity on a path to understand the implications of their actions and to change or course correct anything that might come in our way. So it's something, it's definitely going to help us to understand the future of the world, not only just understand the future of the world, but even change it to a better future if we really act upon the advice of Jyotisha. The advice of Jyotisha is very simple. It basically reiterates the foundation of Vedic philosophy, which is karma. When you study Jyotisha in detail, you really appreciate karma and you start to be a better human being. And that's the goal. Whichever science you study, you want to be a better human being, or you want to modify the environment around you to be better than what it is. So you just want to leave the surroundings a better place than you found it. So that is the purpose of Jyotisha as well. All we want to do is to help educate people about karma, the consequences of their actions, and to advise them on the future to make sure that they make better actions to avoid pain to both themselves and others. So that's what I have understood it so far, and it is a lot more deeper than this as and when we get into the philosophy. But this interest at the age of 11 has just only increased day by day. And today, and at age of 14, I was just doing my, advanced studies in Jyotisha, because in 2 years I'd already completed all the fundamentals and even the intermediate levels. I was doing my advanced studies on my own because the courses that I was going through at that time were not giving me the level of information that I really wanted to in order to make predictions. So at the age of 14, I was just going through all these historical patterns and cycles. I was going through the rise of empires, the fall of different empires in the world, and I was very fascinated by history. I'm still fascinated by history a lot because I do credit partially some of the predictions that I've made to this keen interest in understanding the history of the world. So I was just going through these patterns and linking them to astrological, cycles and everything. And one day when I was just meditating up in my terrace, I just finished my daily meditation, and it's my practice to look at the planetary positions of the day in the morning, not out of anxiety, not out of any negative feeling. It's just a practice that a lot of people, do in ancient India. They used to do in ancient India. So I was just looking at the Panchangam, and something was very strange. This was in August of 2019. We had a lot of planets aligning in a peculiar format that wouldn't happen very regularly. This was something strange. But that book, the paper which I was having, didn't give me more information than that. So I had to use my laptop and go through the software which I have and see if this has happened any time in the past. I looked at certain particulars. Just like human beings, just like several other things, no planetary position is the exact replica of the other. At no time is the exact replica of the other with reference to planetary positions. But there are some areas, there are some positions which are similar to others. So there was this position, it was similar to 1918, and we had a great conjunction. It was similar to 1921. It was again similar to very ancient time frames. It was similar to 1600. It was similar to 1200s. And then I was just looking at it. Something very dangerous is going to happen to humanity in this period. In the 1200s, Genghis Khan almost destroyed half of the existent civilization at that point of time, literally, crossing the paths from one side of the world to the other side. And then in the 1600s, we had the British Empire do a similar thing, although the technological prowess of the British Empire was another leap beyond that of Genghis Khan. What we were just seeing was that the technological progress was increasing, but the situation was almost here and there the same. A lot of people did die because of the British Empire, just that even now it's covered up to a large extent. So if you just look at it, history, you have those cyclical things that were happening repeatedly every 400 years, and every 20 years we had sub periods going on. And 2020 was one of them. And it's at that moment it struck me that something very huge is going to happen in 2020. At that time, I thought it could be a world war. To be very honest, I did not have a very clear picture of what was happening. I never claimed to be a prophet. I don't claim to have some divine revelations of any sort. I was meditating, and it's after that that I realized this. I would attribute it to some sort of intuition and some sort of nudging by the divine, definitely, to make me understand this. But I did not have a proper vision, which is why in my video, which is now one of the most viewed astrological predictions, um, I was mainly focusing on a world war because I thought it could most likely be a world war. But then I also had other cyclical patterns which suggested a disease. So I also included at around 10 minutes and 20 seconds in that video, I mentioned that there could be a possibility, a very strong possibility of a major disease that could kill a lot of people. I said millions of people around the world. So that's exactly what happened. And I gave the timeline as well, November 2019 to April 2020, and specifically between February and April, because that's when this combination was intensifying. Planetary positions were coming closer to each other, and things were astrologically getting worse. So till around January 15th or 16th, I was getting a lot of, funny comments and some hate comments as well on YouTube. Like nothing's happened. November's passed, December's passed, January's passed, and January's nearly over and nothing's happened. And I was like, it has happened in the past, and I was pretty confident it will happen, but I stayed silent and I let time speak for itself. And in February, when the news came out of COVID and the whole world getting locked down, different countries one after the other, a recession happened, which also I had predicted in the same video. And everything happened. I was partly overwhelmed, and my confidence in astrology was, reinstated all of a sudden very strongly. Always had it, but when a thing happens once again, and when you knew that it could happen, the confidence is reinstated immediately. So I had to go deeper into this. I had to understand what could happen in the future. I was very interested in this at that time. So I then made another prediction the next year, and then followed it up with another one the next year. I made a prediction about, the rise of all kinds of technology, including cryptocurrencies. I predicted the peak price of cryptocurrencies in 2021 as well, with the exact, almost the exact date. I was off by 1.5 weeks or so. And then I also predicted how exactly it would fall, and approximate correlations to the past of these cryptocurrencies. And then I followed it up in 2022 with a prediction of the Russia-Ukraine war. And although I did not mention the location, I just said that between around March of 2022, there could be a major conflict which will shake the world in terms of the geopolitical situation. And exactly 6 days before March, around 4 days before March, we had around the 22nd or 24th, if I'm not wrong. I think it was the 24th of February. We had the Russia-Ukraine war that began. That was just days after Saturn entered a new asterism. So it was pretty much predictable, because the last time this happened, several situations occurred. For example, Hitler was declared Führer of Germany. So I just used those positions. I correlated cycles. I correlated 1935, 1934 to 2022, and lo, it happened. So then I wanted to improve the accuracy, because this time I did not get the location right. I did not mention it would be Russia and Ukraine. So in 2023, I made this prediction with the approximate location as well, marking a region in the Middle East, showcasing that this could be the area wherein a huge conflict could occur. And this would most likely be a terrorist attack. Why? Because as the same position had repeated in 2001 when the 9/11 attacks occurred. So I was very much sure that a similar position, similar thing could happen. And I just linked it up. So basically, the pattern is like this: terrorist attack, and then war on terrorism, which kills 10 times more people than the initial terrorist attack, and
Yeah.
then a lot of suffering, a lot of misery, a lot of torture, which is going on. Exactly a replica, if you look at it in an unbiased manner, irrespective of political affiliations, irrespective of religious affiliations. It's an exact, almost an exact replica of the US Iraq situation and everything else. And whatever happened 9/11 and post 9/11, it's a replica. So I'm still fascinated by this. Even though I know the astrological positions behind this, I'm fascinated by the whole concept of cyclical, repetitiveness of things happening.
Mm.
And I'm still researching into this. I think if we apply AI on this is going to go a next level. And if we
Mm.
combine our intuition and our spiritual foundation with artificial intelligence to interpret data patterns, I think we can predict a lot of events. But the intent needs to be right. I have been asked by several people, including people in power, to make predictions about events that, wherein my predictions could lead to certain outcomes which are not dharmic, which I have refused to lead. So the intent is absolutely important here.
Mhm.
And I believe my journey in Jyotisha is more spiritual. I intend that it should be spiritual. I also very often do get distracted by everything that's going on around the world, but I do remind myself very much regularly that compassion is the cornerstone of Vedic philosophy, and we must always have compassion. And the journey in Jyotisha is meant to enlighten humankind, not to confuse them further. And then I reroute myself wherever necessary. And with the grace of God, with the grace of the elders, and with the scriptural suggestions, this is what I have embarked on as a spiritual path as well as my material path. I consider this to be my work as well, my profession as well, and at the same time, I consider this to be a spiritual path for myself. Dhanyavad.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. That's a very comprehensive, history of where you've come from and the big events in your life that have got you to this point. Let me just go back, if I may, for a little bit.
Sure.
Um, Tell me a little bit about your education, because the context of my question really is in the 21st century, most parents around the world are,
Mm,
in a bit of a conundrum around children and education. Education systems, on one hand, are very developed because of the internet and technology. So we have access to information all the time. Like now, look at this. This is a learning
mm.
tool for someone watching this particular podcast. And YouTube is essentially a university on steroids, right? I mean, it's insane. It's crazy. And at the same time, you have social media apps that are creating what I call the 10-second generation, which I
So,
believe, my theory is that because of social media, and I'd love your commentary on this, because of social media, um, dopamine addictions that are happening through the apps, we as in including our generation and older, not just the young people, we are now we have this habit and kind of behavior to swallow up 10 or 15 seconds as we scroll through different apps, and you could spend hours scrolling, and that has affected our level of tolerance and patience for ideas and concepts that go outside of that 10 or 15 or 20-second bracket, and especially those that don't match up with our views on ideals. Therefore, the amount of tolerance for people who have different views and opinions and compassion, because that's the word you use, is, I feel, it's dissipating and it's sort of diluting in society. That's my view on how social media apps have an effect on populism, on creating populism. Um, We'll come back to this, but I want to figure out, did your parents send you to conventional school? Were you homeschooled? What happened with your schooling? Because um, in the typical schooling structure, I don't think anyone will be able to do what you're doing, even if we leave aside the fact that you might have some genius ability and your soul is blessed or divine. Tell us about your schooling. I'm intrigued by your parents and their decisions around you and your
yes.
development.
So first of all, I consider myself a very ordinary individual. If there is anything that I have done, I just consider myself a nimitta. In the Bhagavad Gita, we talk about nimitta, nimitta matram bhavasavya sachin, which is, we are just an instrument and, the totality. So I was homeschooled entirely, and you're right. I think I wouldn't have possibly been able to get deeper into these scriptures if I was at school. Probably because they wouldn't have at all given any regard to the subject, especially when I was learning. It was around 2005, 2006. It was the peak of, crushing the, culture of the, the Vedic philosophy or Bharatiya culture. We had a situation at that time, which I've personally experienced, in which people used to, not the ordinary people, but the people at the top, be in the educational sphere or say in the political sphere, who used to crush the overall idea of Vedic culture. So
Mm.
astrology was an absolute no-no. I was born in 2005, so I was getting, I was a little kid, 2011, 2012, 13, 14. And around 2011, 12, 13, we were outside India. I was in Germany. That's where my mom got the idea of homeschooling, because she saw the Indian schooling system and the schooling system elsewhere, the rigidity of these schooling systems. I would say Germany was still better than Bharata at that point of time. So, because of that rigidity, I was not encouraged to study Sanskrit. Ironically, in Australia, when I was studying, however, when I was a little kid, for the first or second standards, they were emphasizing the study of Sanskrit in the school. I was studying at the Erasmus school over there, and they were emphasizing the study of Sanskrit. But in India, Sanskrit was the last thing you want somebody to study, and it was something like, it was something like the past. We should let go of it, and we should embrace something in the future. We should follow the West. We should basically, be a replica copy of whatever the West does. Of course, take the good things, but we need not be a replica copy of the West. So this is something that my mom realized early on. So she pulled me out of school because even I wanted to explore this. So she said, we'll get you education at home. And whatever is necessary. Say I had a teacher for all the different subjects that were necessary to understand. I wouldn't call myself an expert in mathematics or anything, or even next to that, but other subjects overall, I got a basic overview and understanding of everything. And for Jyotisha or astrology, whatever is required, I studied that at home. Sanskrit, we had a teacher who came to home, or I used to go to his house once in a while to learn from him every single day without fail. Early in the morning, we had classes. So it was homeschooling, which I believe which helped a lot in this journey. But I wouldn't say that this should be followed by everybody. Each person has their own different, passion. And I think you can be a great in your own field without having to be homeschooled as well. It's possible, but just that the environment around you must be flexible. There are schools, there are teachers who are open to new ideas, but they're rare. But there are teachers in schools who are open to new ideas and who can help you enunciate them, who can help you grow them inside of yourself. But the 99% of schools and colleges today are very restrictive, have a very boxed approach towards ancient philosophy, specifically things that seem pseudoscientific to them, like astrology. Astrology is not science in the way that science is perceived today. The definition of
Mm.
science today is very different. You always call for evidence. But the definition of science in the Vedic realm is called Vijnana, which means you be inquisitive, you be curious, you don't be closed. Vishesha Jnana. Vijnana, essentially, the broken up part of it is Vishesha Jnana, specialized knowledge. So you specialize in something, you be open towards it, you be intuitive towards it, you try to understand it,
Mm.
and you also apply the rules of modern science to it, which of course have their roots again in Vedic Tarka and logic and philosophy. So definitely you do follow the rules of hypothesis to conclusion, but at the same time you remain open, at least at the stage of hypothesis, which unfortunately astrology has not been given the space to do. And of course, part of this blame lies on the astrologers of the last 200 years, at least 90% of them, who haven't expressed Jyotisha in the way that it had to be expressed. We had a few greats like Dr. B.V. Raman, K.N. Rao, Mahodaya, etc., who have done a great job at this. But 99% of the astrologers, unfortunately, could not or would not express astrology in the way that it was supposed to be.
Mm. Mm.
And my purpose in Jyotisha was to prove to the world, not through just mere words of philosophy or all kinds of things, but actual predictions. For example, recently I've challenged people to prove one of my predictions wrong, especially the recent ones, and at least, or if not that, explain how else I could have predicted this.
Yeah.
So I think this whole approach to it was because of homeschooling, not being scared of teachers from the very beginning. In certain schools in India, they really make you scared of the teacher.
I
And,
remember when I was a child. Yes.
Yeah, you got to be really scared of even asking a question, standing up and asking a question, like
Yeah.
silenced, sit down and just listen to what's being talked about. Maybe in the West it's not that bad, but in India, especially when I was studying, and of course you might have a better experience of that. The overall situation at schools is restrictive. That changes. I think a lot of amazing work can come out if I, with the limited intelligence that I have been able to bring out some of these things. I think people with far more intelligence than me, far more IQ than me, capabilities than me, can probably bring out more than I have brought out. It's only if the environment is flexible, the schooling systems are flexible, and children are allowed to communicate more effectively,
Mm.
this is possible. And I think homeschooling made this possible for me, and I thank my parents for this,
Yeah,
definitely.
beautiful. And God bless your parents because they took a leap of faith, and I guess they were able to understand you and what your needs were and what your demeanor was, what and maybe perhaps they also intuited that you had a greater purpose beyond the conventional sort of normal distribution of children, that most of us are forced to follow. Let me take you to another place because you have so much to say and so much knowledge. But just for the benefit of people who are unfamiliar with your world, who would be listening to these words for the first time, then let me just sort of dispel some myths straight away, because people jump to conclusions, right, straight away. So do you believe you are um, a prodigy? Do you believe you are exceptional in the sense that you were born to do this and you have this extra sensory ability? And what I mean by that is not your brain, not your ability to pattern recognize, but is there something else that you have figured out, maybe, that is beyond your ability to be a correlator or look for causations or patterns?
I think intuition has played a significant role in some of my predictions, because some of these predictions like happened out of nowhere, because astrology of course is pattern recognition, definitely there is
Right.
that part, but there's so many different patterns that picking one out of those many different patterns is an exceedingly difficult task. So intuition aids you to do that, and of course the sages who have compiled 5,000 years worth of so much information in their ancient treatises, that was purely through meditation and also partly through observation. All of that has helped me a lot. So I wouldn't call myself a prodigy or a prophet or someone who has some sort of extrasensory capabilities. Intuition is something I've experienced at certain times, which has aided me in the predictions, but definitely not extrasensory perception or anything of that sort. That hasn't played any role in my, predictions much. Yeah.
Right. So you're not a psychic or a medium, so you're not
Yes,
channeling the spirit world,
I'm not.
correct?
Definitely not.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And you're not someone who will give us the lottery numbers for tomorrow either.
No way, no way. I've gotten people do that, ask me for that. And really, some people in East Asia, specifically in Taiwan and Korea and Philippines, where I have a lot of, people who follow these predictions of mine. Um, they've given me this name, which I roughly translated as an Indian prodigy or an Indian prophet of some sort in Chinese or in Korean. And they expect me, literally expect me to predict every single event that happens in the world. I do catch a few, but that does not mean I can predict everything. They're like, predict the next this, predict the next this, or if I accidentally don't predict something. I have had very rare inaccuracies, but I have, missed certain predictions, like certain events which I haven't thought about. For example, the Turkey earthquake.
Mhm.
One day before it, I really felt something major could happen, but the location, no. What could happen? No, I had no idea of it. So I have made a couple of misses as well. And it's natural because you can't make every single prediction. That when you make a few in a row, if you make a good, list of predictions, people automatically expect you to do it continuously in the future. They want you to predict everything. And if you don't do it, there's going to be a backlash and this and that. So it's quite stressful. But I
Mm.
would like to reiterate that I'm definitely not someone who could predict lottery numbers or anything of that sort.
Do you have
Yeah.
visualizations when you talk about intuition? Are you visualizing an outcome like a tsunami or something good? Is that what you're visualizing, or is it a feeling? What is it? Help us understand what you feel.
Yes. So it's not a visualization specifically. it is more of like a deep feeling. For example, just before I made the Israel-Hamas war prediction, I had this deep gut feeling that a terrorist attack could occur, something that I never felt in the past. I was reading a whole lot about terrorism all of a sudden. I was studying terrorist patterns over years. Like, why would I do that? Of course, September 11th was a month before that, but I only felt like I had to make a video around, the end of September or something of that sort. And that day, when I was about to make this video, I had planned another video to make. I was about to talk about a general overview of the sun and what the sun represents. I was starting a new series, but something told me no. I think there's something more important than this, which is supposed to be discussed. And back I went to the cyclical analysis. I had not yet figured out a pattern, but then the pattern appeared, 2001. I suddenly saw the north node of the moon and the south node of the moon aligning on two sides of the zodiac with Jupiter and Mars. And that's when I realized, no, this is something more important. And when did this happen last? 2001. Similarly, just before 2020, there was this deep gut feeling to actually look into these planetary positions. So there's this gut feeling that happens that allows you, and it gives you a direction. So you have Wikipedia, you have data in front of you, but what to choose, what to start with, that gut feeling to say, go with this and leave this, go with this first. That gut feeling, I think, has helped a lot. It's definitely not a visualization. I haven't experienced a visualization till date, but it's that gut feeling, that intuition, which has driven me towards going in that direction. Astrological treatises do give you information on how to pick the patterns, but even sometimes the information isn't enough to actually pick a specific pattern.
Beautiful. We're going to come to technology in a second, but I have a few more questions that I need to throw out to you. Again, for the benefit of the people who are watching this. Do you believe in alien civilization?
I would say I believe that it would be a bit, it wouldn't be ideal to think that we are the only civilization existing in the universe. That would be a very narrow way of viewing the world. Because first of all, the Earth is such a tiny, tiny speck of dust in, when you look at the overall cosmos. So thinking that we are the only beings existing in this entire universe would be very strange and very narrow-minded. So definitely can't rule it out. But if you ask me my personal opinion on this, supported by the scriptures, the Vedas, which clearly describe some of these alien civilizations. They talk about different areas of the world where there are different types of beings located. And they're not talking about the solar system, they're talking about outside the solar system. They're describing specific asterisms, specific galaxies. And they've already talked about the Vishnu Nadi, the center of the galaxy. And of course, this is a very long topic, but I recently also discovered that the sages knew the center of the galaxy at 0 degrees Sagittarius. They mentioned that if anyone is born when the moon is transiting the center of the Milky Way galaxy, the center of the present galaxy we're living in, that child would be affected by health problems. So I was for very long thinking, why that specific point? Why pick 0 degrees Sagittarius as a point where things could go wrong for a child, just if the moon was moving through that position when the child was born? The sages never mentioned why, but they've just said 0 degrees Sagittarius. If the moon moves through this, there's a problem. I realized that the largest supermassive black hole in our galaxy is located just around 0 degrees Sagittarius. And they didn't mention this, but how did they know that such an influence existed around that region without any sophisticated equipment, without anything? Why did they specifically mention that there was a black hole there? So basically, this is the depth of Sanatana Dharma. This is the depth of the understanding that they had at that time. They did not want to give us that depth of information at that time, probably, but this is what they had. This is why I've always been curious about these patterns.
Shlokas. I know you are having watched some of your other videos. You've talked a lot about shlokas, and in fact, in a recent presentation somewhere in Asia at a blockchain conference, you finished your presentation with a shloka of sorts. So help us understand, what is the potential natural science behind these shlokas? And why do they create, in your opinion, because you have said this, a form of energy or good energy, and some, if said in the wrong way at the wrong frequency at the wrong time, can also have opposite effects, which is what we've heard. Tell us, for the masses listening to this, when you see people from backgrounds, Hindu backgrounds, for example, Sanatana backgrounds, who use shlokas, whether it's the Gayatri mantra or any other mantra. That's a popular one. Of course, most people sort of know that. What is the science behind it, in your opinion?
Definitely. So I think we're just beginning to, in the scientific world, we're just beginning to understand the effects of, different auditory signals on the human brain. But the sages, I believe, already had a knowledge of this. It's still a hypothesis from the scientific perspective. So if this is a question about the scientific perspective, like the evidence, we have limited evidence. Of course, there is a very strong, there is very strong evidence to back up the water memory effect, which I think helps in understanding the effect of mantras on our surroundings. Because if we have positive emotions, automatically the surroundings become, more positive. They become more aligned, more harmonized. So similarly, if you chant mantras, because mantras are purely positive. If you're talking about the positive mantras, they're purely positive. They're like, let there be peace, let there be shanti, let there be good things that will happen to the world. So when you're chanting a mantra, you're basically uttering these positive chants that have been uttered by thousands and thousands and thousands of ancient people in the same intent, with the same intent and with the same, auditory movement. They've been chanting this for a very long time. So definitely this has a parampara effect. So if everyone's chanting this, I believe there is some sort of a very strong connection to this mantra that humans have developed over a period of time, if chanted, brings that back into life and helps us in the most critical times. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that, as I mentioned, we haven't yet explored the vast depth of what these mantras can do. And not every shloka can, cause harm if chanted in the wrong way. It's only just a very few of them, which are mostly in the Vedas and which are intended for a specific purpose. Either creative purpose or some sort of purpose which may cause a negative effect. Otherwise, if you make a mistake, it's just going to be like, it wouldn't have the intended effect, but it wouldn't harm you in any way. So one need not be afraid of that. And secondly, basic shloks can be chanted by everybody. In fact, Sanatana Dharma not only comprises present day Hinduism, it comprises the Upanishadic thought and the Upanishadic way of life, the Vedic way of life. It encompasses Jainism, it encompasses Buddhism, it encompasses all those schools of thought which are inclusive, which allow for, a great deal of freedom of understanding. Within Hinduism, you can see different types of sects basically who have, polar opposite beliefs
Right.
coming together and sitting for a peaceful debate with each other. You see this since thousands of years. And even now, today, you have Dvaita, you have Advaita, you have Vishishtadvaita. Despite the massive differences, we coexist so beautifully. Probably because of certain political elements, things change periodically, but Sanatana Dharma always will remain this beacon of peace. Except for, humans can make anything violent, but except for a few episodes, it's always been a peaceful, development of humankind, philosophically and intellectually. So I think this is what it is. This is the root of Jyotisha as well. So yeah.
Beautiful. Couple more, and then we'll move into the technologies, because these are burning questions. What's your view on death? How would you understand or explain death to people?
Yes, so that is just the end of one chapter and the beginning of another chapter in a book with infinite chapters, until one understands the finale to that book, which is a very deep thing, which one cannot simply comprehend through words. It is an experience, the finale. Until an individual understands the ultimate reality of the world, which has been described by some people who have experienced it, and which has been encoded in the scriptures, which is oneness. The understanding that there is no difference, there is no duality, there is no difference. It's duality, it is difference which brings about all misery in the world. And it is Maya, an illusion, an illusory energy which makes us believe that things are different. And even science is beginning to confirm this. If you look into this table in front of me, this laptop in front of me, and this body of mine, there is practically and theoretically no difference between these two, except Chaitana, or the consciousness, which varies in between. There is no difference. So until one understands that that final understanding, death is just a chapter in between. It's like the end of one chapter, the beginning of another chapter, and it just goes on, continues and continues. And depending on your actions in this chapter of life, you will be affected in the next chapter of life. And all those effects are also illusory, they are also temporary. Pain and pleasure both are temporary. That's the Vedic thought. There is no permanency of these feelings. And even if there is extreme pain, although the Vedas advocate deep compassion for every single soul on planet Earth, including trees and animals, we also need to understand that there is no reality to pain and pleasure. They are both temporary, they're both illusory. It's like the movie The Matrix, where
Mhm.
they kind of
Yes.
explain this, but in a more melancholic fashion. But if you look at it from the Vedic perspective, instead of a nihilistic perspective, it helps to understand that death is not the end of everything. That is such a dissatisfying perspective, which quickly turns to hedonism. When you look at death as the end of everything, you either become nihilistic or you become hedonistic. And
Absolutely.
hedonism is what most animals choose. Humans as
Yeah.
being animals, when you realize that, death is the end of everything, you either, go say, this is the life and do everything that I can do to give satisfaction to myself or those around me. The very rare few who are atheistic or who don't believe in reincarnation, but at the same time who are not hedonistic and who help others. There are a few rare people who are very, very pure and very sattvic, in my humble opinion. They are the best candidates for spiritual progress. And that will come to them automatically, even if they are atheistic at some point of time in their cycle of life. So I believe that it's important to consider that death is just the end of one chapter, learn lessons from this life, and despite the memory being erased, it will be stored. That's the Vedic thought. It will be stored for the next life. Not the memory, but the effects of these actions. And whenever something good or bad happens, we have to understand that it's a result of some of those actions. Because where can that effect go? It has to go somewhere in the future. So death is just an end and a beginning at the same time.
Beautifully said. Unfortunately, I've had a couple of experiences that have been near death in my life, and
Hmm.
um, I have to say they needed to happen for me to be at the point I am in my life. And it's opened my eyes to many possibilities. And I'm a big believer of intuition, also visualization, which is something that I've been experiencing for a while now.
Hmm.
So I hear you. One final one, which is about the back in the day. I remember when we were kids, my mother said she went to this place somewhere in Varanasi or close by, where there was uh, this concept of Brigu. This person who had predicted everything in the past, and you go there and you give your details in this sort of abstract. It's a small little cubby hole, and they pull out a sheet of paper or like an old wrapped up paper, and they read it out, and it happens to be your destiny laid out. What is? Are you familiar with that? What is that? And is
Yes.
can that be true, or is that sort of made up?
I think because too many people have told me of accurate predictions through the Nadi system, so I couldn't
Nice.
resist but try to understand this better. So I went into certain details and I understood that, yeah, about 80% of the Nadi readers that exist today probably are not having the right information or probably are faking it to an extent. But there are very genuine practitioners of this, which leads us again to the same question of cyclicity. There are certain patterns of individuals that have been identified in the past and which have been encoded in these palm leaf manuscripts, which kind of show what kind of destiny you're going to reach. And these are very peculiar patterns, something that cannot be explained by science at all in any way. I think even in the future, we may not be able to understand this problem. These are like what you would call glitches in the matrix of some
Yeah.
sort. So this happens, but it's very very rare. It's not something that you know you can come across in your everyday life. Very few people who have gotten very accurate predictions from this, but their accuracy is something that had me searching for the truth behind this. But unfortunately, I've also heard that people who practice this form of astrology, which is not astrology, which is more on, it's more on the psychic part of things. So people who practice that generally would not have a very happy life of their own, is what I've heard. So I stayed away from getting deeper into that
Mm.
because it's something that is being told by the elders. So I thought it's better for me to just listen to that. Yeah.
Have you done a nadi for yourself, or have you figured out, well, this is my path, this is my purpose?
I haven't done a nadi for myself, but I once, just I when I was learning astrology, someone asked, I was just walking in, and that person was kind of a face reader. So
Yeah.
this was when I was about 13 years old, and no, sorry, about 12 years old, and I just started to learn astrology. I was fascinated by it. That person knew face reading. Unfortunately, I've never been able to find that person again. I probably need to search for that person somewhere. But they told me that there is a specific pattern which they identified in my face, which they did not reveal, that I would be a scholar who would help a lot of people in the future understand the truth of the scriptures. And I hope this is my purpose in life. I hope that I continue on this path, if at all I have started on this path. And I really hope that I achieve this specific purpose for this lifetime, which has been assigned to this body and this mind. So I think that has been just one experience of mine. But apart from that, I haven't gone to a Nadi reader. But if if my destiny permits, at some point of time, I would.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Sorry, I had to throw a bunch of questions at you because, and
That
you
is fine, no problem.
answered them beautifully. So
Thank
let's
you.
move on to something that is going to be very, very interesting for many people out there, which is
Mhm.
your view, and I think you define it as the cusp of transformation. Yeah, the cusp of transformation over the next 2 decades, which will have an impact on at least the next 400 years. I mean, that's a huge statement. Perhaps that's going to be the title of our podcast. Um, what does
So
that mean for all of the listeners? What's please unpack that for us.
definitely. So the reasoning behind this is very simple. When Saturn and Jupiter, the most, the farthest planets from the Earth, which can be visible through the naked eye. Beyond that, of course, you will need some equipment or probably very vague observation. Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. Pluto itself is contested, but anyways, Saturn and Jupiter, which are very large grahas compared to Uranus and Pluto, Neptune as well. When you look at Saturn and Jupiter, they basically appear to coincide once every 20 years because Jupiter takes around 12 years to go around the zodiac, which
Right.
is 12 constellational parts, and Saturn, which takes 30 years. So we get to 20 years, a meeting point for Saturn and Jupiter in both of their cycles. So every 20 years, we see a significant change in the way humanity thinks. And I've given some examples of this in my lecture to the Asia Blockchain Summit in Taipei. But I'll just give, because their time was limited, and today I'll just give a basic overview of what was happening in the past. And then viewers can themselves formulate a picture of how significant this time is. So if you look at certain significant events. I don't have them with me in the form of a presentation, but I'll just think of them now. So if you look at it, 1603, for example, let's start from 1200. 1206, we had one of the most significant great conjunctions. Exactly the same year, Genghis Khan was crowned as the leader of their people. And this is a pattern. A few people come together, they crown a leader, and the leader, goes ahead, becomes an autocrat or a dictator or probably a compassionate leader. It's left to chance,
Hmm.
left to destiny, if you ask an astrologer. So when you go through the patterns of what happened in that time frame, you had Jupiter and Saturn meeting together at a very specific, dangerous section, and we had this leader who turned out to be, causing a lot of change in society itself, killing tremendous number of people. And then when you go ahead and see the Black Death, it was also preceded by a great conjunction. You go ahead and see 1603, when the next great conjunction happened, approximately. The British Empire rose, the stock market rose, and everything of significance that is ruling the world today rose in that period. America, of course, the United States of America is just like a extension of the British Empire, which then morphed into its own. But whatever is ruling the world today, whatever is leading the world today, started around 1603, approximately those 2 or 3 years, which was again preceded by a great conjunction. And then go forward in history. One of the most significant ideologies which altered the way humans thought and is still altering, governments around the world is communism. And communism started off again in a very strong way. Of course, Karl Marx and several other thinkers had formulated these ideas long ago. But 1921 is when communism actually took shape in a in a very powerful manner. And this happened with the rise of the Chinese Communist Party, which was established right in 1921. And also, the first state based on communism was established in 1921. That's the USSR. So if you
Right.
just look at these patterns, you're just shocked by the power. Why is it that communism had to rise in that specific year in the two, most significant countries, apart from the United States that we have today, Russia and China? We had the USSR, we had China, the CCP, which was founded in that year. Now, fast forward to certain other significant great conjunctions. Some great conjunctions have political changes, some great conjunctions have socio-economic changes, some great conjunctions have geopolitical changes, some have changes to the health of human beings, some just alter the whole natural system, some create massive disasters. So each great conjunction has a peculiar character, but all of them share one thing in common, and that is massive change. So the next closest great conjunction that we are seeing is in 2020, that we just saw in 2020, where Jupiter and Saturn, which came really, really close to each other. And what we saw was unprecedented. Have we ever, in the history of humanity, I ask, seen people, entire countries being locked down? Have you ever seen that happening in a synchronous, within 2 months, you see the whole world locked down? Right. We have never seen something like this happening in the past. And that's why it's so special. We've seen the Black Death killing millions of people, much more than what COVID did, about 20% to 30% of the European population. That was a peculiar character of a great conjunction. And this is another peculiar character. Not everything that happens after great conjunctions is bad. Some very good things happen. We have the rise of great technology. We have new leaps in human innovation. We have amazing new understandings of humans. We have problems that lead to solutions, and the rapid change in the technological landscape after a great conjunction is a sight to behold, something that we saw in 2020. We saw blockchain technology that just mushroomed out of nowhere. And along with that, some socio-economic changes take place. We have sudden hyperinflation in certain countries. We have, because of course, the technological progress, we have hyperinflation. We have, we have so many strange economic patterns that take place. We have sudden rapid growth. We saw the shortest recession in US history in 2020, followed by shortest and sharpest for the period of time that was experienced, if I'm right. And then we had, again, a very sharp increase in the stock market as well. And the valuations of companies, technologies, everything right in the same year. What I believe is going to happen over the next 20 years is definitely technology is going to be progressing at an unprecedented rate. But at the same time, there is going to be one thing which we will be caught unawares, which I believe, based on my pattern analysis, is agriculture and food. Currently, the whole world is focusing on new technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and all sorts of things, blockchain, and this and that. And of course, there's going to be progress there. But when everyone's focusing on one direction, there's probably one thing that's not being given enough attention. That's food. That's the soil. Soil is not being given enough attention, and that leaves us both an opportunity as well as challenge. And that is, soil is deteriorating rapidly, which will make pure, unadulterated, or nutritious soil one of the most important commodities by 2040. And we are humans, we tend to commoditize everything. So land will become very important. Food will become very important by 2040. Why am I saying this? Because I analyzed the patterns of the previous great conjunctions that shared similarities with this one. And the last time nearest when this happened, very similar to this, was 1921. And why did communism rise in 1921? Coming back to that story, it was because there was great famine from 1917 to 1921. In the aftermath of, and in between the World War I, just after World War I began, a great famine also began. Millions of people, if you just look up the Russian famine, it is shocking. There are pictures of people literally becoming skeletons, and food became the most important thing. Basic human rights became this cornerstone of what humans would believe and think in the future. The current ideologies all have their root in 1920s. So this is what I just noticed. I believe that food will again become an important point, and it is not something that we haven't defeated famines yet. We tend to believe so because of our rapid technological progress. But how long can we make this machine last? We are basically overutilizing nature. We are drugging the soil to produce for us, and we think this is eternal. But we human beings with a lifespan of about 60 to 100 years, think that we can keep this machine running for eras is just comical, and it is also a tragedy at the same time. It's not possible to let this machine run. I think an inflection point is 2040, wherein humans will realize the true value of soil, and it's quite close by. So I would suggest most people to pay attention to soil and appreciate the moments that soil is allowing us to have today, which is
Mm,
the food, the nutrition, and the whole world we're running on today. We're still not, humanoid robots that are running on electricity alone. We also
mm,
do need nutritious food. And it's not just the rich and the powerful who should have access to this. Everyone should have access to pure and good food.
mm,
So, and without having to kill animals, we should be able to source good food. So, for that, soil is absolutely important. And even for those who are non vegetarians, in fact, non vegetarianism itself would contribute to a great deal of soil degradation. It is
mm,
happening, it is proven by science as well. It's just something we don't discuss so that we don't offend others. But
mhm,
since we have to speak the truth, when you kill an animal, you're destroying more food than you could by, say, feeding 100, people who need food just with vegetarian food by supplementing it with similar amounts of nutrition and, in fact, greater amounts of nutrition in certain cases. So
mm,
I think the world needs to look into food. Food will be the most important point in 2039 to 2040. And I think a series of global conflicts in the near future is going to make that the most important commodity. Try farming, explore the idea of farming on your own, not just buying up land everywhere,
mm,
but understanding how to use that land and what to do with that land. People are buying land everywhere, but we have to understand what to do with that land. The other thing is that currently the real estate trends are about the most important location near the city and all the, closer to technological centers.
mhm,
This is what everyone thinks,
mm,
but no one's paying attention to the purity of soil, the nutritional potential of soil. I have read many books of Vandana Shiva Mahodaya. You might have heard of her. She's an amazing ecological scientist, and I would suggest everyone listening to this podcast today also please read the books of Dr. Vandana Shiva. She's an amazing individual, and she's put this down in such a wonderful way. And I just added astrological timing to this, but I think 2040 is where I see some of these events kind of spiraling out of control.
mm, mm. Very, very, very good points. And I hear you. And I totally believe that. In fact, a year ago, I was in India, in Hubli, near Bangalore, and there was a lot
Hmm.
of amazing agri innovation going on at a grassroots level. Young people trying to use robots, basic robots, to seed plantation and
Yes.
things like that. And I came back to the UK and I was trying to sort of help the government understand. Now there's a new government, so maybe that I'll have a better chance. And the
Hmm.
problem with city life is that we consume way more than we need to, and we
Hmm.
have very small spaces, and we don't grow anything in those spaces. They're just nice looking gardens. In fact, people actually remove their gardens now and put in the fake turf. It's really quite bad. Um,
True.
and I've always thought that the future teachers, if you think of the top universities in the world, I reckon it's the farmers. I reckon they need a bit of coaching and packaging, but the farmers will actually be the most important educators in the future because they understand grassroots, literally, without pun intended, literally grassroots, seed plantation and agricultural techniques to help us move forward. So I think you raised a great point. Thank you for that because you've triggered something in my mind. I'll just move to AI for a second because, of course, it's such a hot topic, and I have interviewed, God knows, at least 20 to 30 authors who've written different books. The AI dilemma, the future of AI, the good of AI regulation, so on and so forth. And so there is, in a reductionist way, I would say there's some people who love AI and they think it's the right thing to do and it's the future. Of course it is because it's the evolution of technology and it'll take away boring jobs no one really wants to do that are repetitive and allow them to be more self-actualized, move up Maslow's hierarchy, if you believe in the hierarchy. And then there are
True.
those who are terrified, they believe their jobs will be taken, the world will be like a Terminator existence eventually, and so on and so forth. Where do you see AI going in your sort of predictive models?
So I see artificial intelligence playing a major role, especially in the next 20 years. And whatever happens with artificial intelligence in the next 20 years is going to impact the world and the way we think for the next 400 years. Think of artificial intelligence as as powerful as any ideology that we have ever seen till date that is combined together. I also think of artificial intelligence and the way it's being applied today as an ideology itself. I'm putting it in that bracket also to see how it's going to affect the world in the future. So definitely I see this rapid transformation because of it. And every great conjunction has seen a great technology and a negative and a positive that arise because of that technology.
Yeah.
See, 1960s, we had the semiconductor industry. 1980s, we had internet, the proliferation of internet technologies all over. And the adoption of that came just 10 years later, but the invention happened 10 years before that. That's what we're seeing now. We're not yet seeing full-fledged adoption of blockchain, but blockchain will be adopted in about 10 to 15 years. As far as artificial intelligence is concerned, I see some amazing innovations that will come about, especially around 2000, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. These specific years are going to see great innovation in artificial intelligence further and further. And throughout these 20 years, between 2020 and 2040, we'll see some amazing innovation. That's one good thing. On the other hand side, we'll see some unprecedented consequences because of AI as well. We'll see people probably getting deeply addicted to it, losing certain abilities because, or basically, we call it atrophy in a way. So intellectual atrophy is something that's going to occur because of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will become sort of an arm for the human brain, and it will atrophy some of the other parts which have been doing its job in the past with unprecedented consequences, with consequences we're not aware of at the moment. So I think this is already happening in a way. I myself feel it sometimes, but when you look at, I allow AI to do some of my tasks, like, just those repetitive, boring tasks, as you mentioned, putting together some information. But there I am letting out some of my critical skills, say, of utilizing the information, of manually looking for it. And while doing that, there might be some creative idea that I might be able to do. Sometimes some people ask AI to ideate certain things, something I've been actively refraining from doing. I try not to ask AI to ideate for me, to be creative intellectually for me, because that will atrophy some of the parts of the brain if I keep doing it consistently. People are doing it. And because people are doing it, I fear, in a way, that some amount of human creativity will be lost. But those who are able to use AI without, giving out and letting go of their talent of ideating and creatively analyzing things, they will do very well in the next 20 years. But the vast majority of people, the way they're using AI, as far as I can see, I see it going the way internet has gone, probably in a more amplified way.
Yeah. So in other words, the folks who already have a creative mind won't be inhibited by AI because they're built for that level of creation. That's how their mind operates. And I relate to that to a large degree. So that's fantastic. Do you think the rebellion against AI is going to be notable in your calculations and predictions, given that you're saying the rise is going to be catastrophic 25, 26, 27, all the way to 30? How do you see the rebellion against AI?
Yes, definitely. I see. Every time there is a revolution, there is also a counter revolution that comes about. And this is actually very good. When you see the rise of extreme parties, you also see the rise of leftist parties. And sometimes when you see the extreme left coming up, you need that to be balanced. So people do it automatically in most cases, but sometimes there is a huge imbalance, which we have seen in several times in the past. We have seen that during the Cambodian massacres. We have seen that when the left has gotten too powerful, things go out of control. And when the right gets too powerful, it goes out of control. So I think there is going to be a revolution around this as well. I do see a political revolution, especially when something wrong goes with AI. And this something wrong going with AI is going to be the trigger. And what exactly this thing is, I'm still not, to be very honest, I've not identified what this is, but I'm very sure this is going to happen. And this is specifically going to happen after 2025 or around after March of 2025 also. There could be some incident which could go wrong with AI because that's when humans respond. Something wrong actually has to happen. We don't listen to philosophers. We don't listen to people who give you ideas, people who think about the future, people whom I've warned in the past as well on videos and everything. No one, is going, not many people are going to actually make a difference because of just listening to us philosophers or, intellectuals. You have to experience it to actually have a reaction to it. So that's going to happen after 2025. There is going to be something that may go wrong, because of which you'll see some regulation and this and that, and you might see more intense competition. And already things are beginning to go wrong with AI, but not that powerful. But then on the other hand side, I don't see massive violence happening because of AI, in the terms of huge political revolutions as we saw with communism and this and that, because AI, at least for now, is not interfering with those aspects of our lives, or companies are consciously trying to avoid that from happening.
Yeah.
In the backgrounds, it is happening. As I mentioned, after 2025, when it comes to the surface, there will be a reaction.
Mm, mm. Amazing. Another few questions, and I will leave you because I'm extracting everything from here. I'm sure you're tired too.
No problem.
Um,
Yes.
do you think we're going to, Elon Musk talks about going to Mars, and I was looking at some of your dates, AI till 2030, then 2040 onwards. Do you believe human beings will exist on another planet based on your planetary calculations?
I definitely see a massive rise in moving, around out of the Earth. But as far as settling in a planet out of the Earth is concerned, I find that an idea that may not take place, at least in the foreseeable future. Because astrologically speaking, I don't have patterns to explain that, because it has never happened in the past. Although this could be a wild card kind of event,
Mhm.
there is no pattern to explain this. We can say humans, first setting their foot on the moon, that pattern is repeating, which is why I mentioned a lot of space explorations could be made. But humans actually living in Mars, this is something I find difficult, to even say in the present time frame. We could say, like, post 2060, when another very significant great conjunction happens, a huge breakthrough is possible around that time. Huge breakthrough. There could be some scientific, colony or something of that sort which could be set up in Mars, and I think it's possible, definitely, astrologically speaking, because if so much progress can be made, um, I think I have to keep the pessimist inside me, silent for a while. I think it's possible that something huge could happen in 2060, a huge breakthrough related to Mars.
Okay. Okay. Well, if I'm
Yes.
still alive, you certainly will be. I'm not sure if I'm going to be alive back then. Um,
We don't know that.
who
Yeah.
knows? And so the last thing is, in your presentation that you were delivering at the blockchain conference, so
Thoughts,
you
right?
were talking about how there's going to be a movement or revolution around or beyond AI, how companies will start to tap into your thoughts, or thoughts will be, um, one of the technological innovations related to that. I picked that up in your presentation. I'm just wanting to understand what that means.
Yes. So basically, what humans have always been exploiting thoughts in different ways, but the way it's going to happen now in the near future is going to be unprecedented. um, Humans have always coveted access to one another's thoughts in some or the other way, trying to understand things either through pattern analysis, either through data, or anthropology in some way, or things like that. But the potential that artificial intelligence gives us to understand human thoughts is next level.
Mhm.
So, to put it in simple words, definitely it's going to be game changing for the world. And if the wrong people get, control of this, which is most likely to happen at some point of time, always, there has to be a balance between good and bad, which is
Mhm.
something we see. So, the wrong people getting control of this is likely at some point of time. So, the modification of thoughts in a mass way is also likely to take place at some point of time,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
Got you,
And
got you.
this might happen in the next 20 years, specifically post 2030. There is a possibility of this. And as I mentioned, there's going to be a counter revolution, which is going to stand up against this sudden, capitalism on human thought itself. It's
Hmm.
happening with algorithms, etc., but the purpose is very different. Currently, it's happening for political purposes, space political purposes. It's also happening for, addicting people to technology, but it's not happening in the sense which I, think it could happen. This could be like mass manipulation of human thought
Hmm.
in a very, synchronous manner, using the best of technology available at that time. This could happen post 2030, or in the run up to 2030, approximately 2028 onwards.
Hmm. Hmm. Got it.
Yes.
Understood. I can't close the show without asking you the most sort of provocative question, which is about the US elections. Have you got any views or predictions about who you think might come into power based on your astrological celestial, modeling?
Yes. So this is a very important question, and I actually speaking must answer this question. But unfortunately, astrology, as far as I've been making predictions with, basically outlines a few rules. You should have the data related to that individual. And here we have so many individuals. The dynamics are too many. When I predicted terrorist attacks and everything else, the dynamics there are quite simple. But when you predict something like an election, the number of dynamics there are too many. You have to consider too many people's birth details and make horoscopes for each one of them and try to understand the overall movement of the planets and everything else. And to add to the confusion, Saturn is making a transit in March 2025. When Saturn is in Aquarius, leftist ideologies still hold strong. When Saturn moves to Pisces, they kind of dim down, and right-wing ideologies come into picture. It's like a beautiful tapestry of human psychology, the way it moves one after the other. After some time, funding also doesn't matter. When you look at the power that humans have in their own hands, money or funding is something that comes second. If you look at the longer cycle of events, if you just focus on the shorter cycle, it's just money. You see money playing a big role in elections. But in the longer cycle, it's also human thought. Saturn is making this move in March 2025, which makes it more confusing for me. So I don't have the birth details, the exact birth details of the two. I've gotten some secondary source data. I've gotten birth certificates of these two, but how far I can trust this data is something, a question that I really can't answer. So far, I really don't have an answer. It's really neck to neck. I looked at the charts that I have based on both of these individuals. And in an interview wherein I was asked this very same question in Taiwan, the person was asking me was an expert in getting out controversial answers. She somehow made me say something, because that person was a vice president of that TV channel,
Right,
and
right.
she has a 40-year experience in bringing out controversial statements out of people. Um, I appreciate her talent, and she got me to say one answer, and I kind of said Donald Trump, and
Mm.
I'm not really sure for what reason. I don't have a very accurate, data set for him. I don't have his accurate horoscope. But even now, I've tend to. I really don't. I don't align with either of the two ideologies that both the parties have over there. I really
Mm.
don't align with any of the two. There's huge gaping problems with both of them. But I just somehow believe that this is more likely to happen. We're likely to see, Trump coming back most likely. But again, I don't have the data. There's just some sort of a, observation as far as cycles are concerned. Very mild observation. Once I get the accurate data, I think I can make a forecast. This should be within the next few weeks. If I don't, I'll make a video stating why I would not as well. Yeah.
Amazing. When are your next predictions coming out on your YouTube channel? I know you've got over 1 million followers and so on. So this is
That's right.
something I'd like to let people know that they should follow you on YouTube. So
Sure.
when is your next one coming out, or are you planning to release another one?
So the thing about me is I'm really I really am not consistent with making videos. I make just 4 videos in a year, or about 3 videos, or maximum 6 or 7 maximum. So I think I'm really not sure when I'm going to make the next video. But the moment I believe there is something very important to tell you all, I'll make a
Mm.
video. This is most likely within the next month or so. I'm just collecting something important. And when I really feel it's important for people to know that, and it is an important subject, and it will have a positive impact on the people who are hearing it, I'll make a video.
Amazing, amazing. It's been a pleasure
Yes.
having you on the show, and I can't wait to meet you in person. And when the show stops, we'll talk offline about where you are
Wonderful.
and
That'll be great.
figure out how we can meet. How has the
Of
experience been
course.
for you today, Abhigya? How have you enjoyed the last hour and a bit with us?
Those were very good questions, very intriguing questions, and things that make me think further. So I think this podcast, in fact, has helped me think further into it. Over the past few days, I haven't been spending time understanding, these cycles. I've just moved over to some other different topic, but this has rekindled my interest in the subject that I left a few days back. So I think that way it's helped me a lot, and the questions were really good. It was a great time speaking with you and sharing thoughts and ideas. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Brilliant having you. We're going to keep an eye on you and keep following you and trying to figure out how we can learn from the wisdom that you have and at such a young age. Whilst I don't worry about age too much because I think your soul might be quite wise. Your physical body is whatever it is, right, at the end of the day. So thank you so
All by
much.
God's grace.
No, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Is there a website, or do we just go on YouTube and type in Abhigya Anand? How do we do
Yeah,
it?
you can just type in my name on YouTube. I do have a website, but I think for most people, YouTube should do. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Well, it's been a real pleasure. So much to take away. And all the straight talkers out there, please definitely follow Abhigya. He's got incredible knowledge. I see him in the next 25, 30 years, evolving into something even bigger and greater in terms of the impact you could make on people around you and humanity. But I love the fact that you remain grounded and there's humility, and you also detach yourself from some of that some side of the of faith, which can also feel like we have herd mentality, where people actually stop thinking, which is actually getting closer to animal stage rather than human stage.
Exactly.
We've been gifted
Exactly.
rationality and intellectualism for that reason. So I love it, and I'm a fan. And thank you so much. Be well, take care,
Thank you,
and
man.
it's been a real pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you. Wish you all the best too. Jai Shri Krishna. Dhanyavad and see you in Bharat.
Absolutely, Jai Shri Krishna.